Hi, I'm Ann Rieselblack, the League's Program Director. Welcome to this month's FF Distance Edition, featuring the work of Boston-based Leers Weinzapfel Associates. Initiated in the fall of 2020, FF Distance Edition studio visits are an online reinvention of the League's popular in-person First Friday office tours and project reviews. Like First Fridays, these programs provide the opportunity to see recent and current projects, as well as to get a sense of where and how firm members work together. This year, like many offices who are working a hybrid schedule, juggling remote work and in-person studio time, the League has been alternating in-person First Fridays in New York City offices with online visits to studios nationwide. All of the programs feature practices navigating the legacies and possibilities of American infrastructure, from ecological systems and transit hubs to community facilities and social networks. We also invite each firm to identify a moderator to introduce and discuss their work, someone who they think could provide interesting commentary and queries about their designs and practice as a whole. Today's program will be moderated by Mark Lamster. Mark is the architecture critic of the Dallas Morning News and a Loeb Fellow and faculty member of the Harvard Graduate School of Design. His 2018 biography of the late architect Philip Johnson, The Man in the Glass House, was a finalist for the National Book Circle Award for biography. Following the presentation, Mark's conversation with Andrea Leers, Jane Weinzapfel, and other firm members, the discussion will be open to all attendees, and you can pose your questions in the Q&A section. That's the Q&A section, not the chat section. Before we begin, a thank you to the League sponsors. This program is supported in part by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, as well as by the League's members whose annual support makes all of our programs and events possible. Please visit archleague.org for further information about membership and the League's upcoming events, as well as past programs. And finally, towards the end of the program, information will be posted in the chat section to those seeking CEUs. And a program note, although this is the last online FF Distance Edition program for the season, we have an upcoming in-person First Friday at HOK's New York City office on May 5th, and we're turning our attention to planning next fall's season. Please check the League's website frequently to see information about this and other upcoming online programs, such as a current work lecture by the Cairo-based architect, climate activist, and preservationist May Al-Abrashi in May, and the online installation and presentations by winners of the League Prize for Young Architects and Designers, which are all launching in June. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Lamster. Thank you, Anne, for that very kind introduction. And hello to everybody out there. And welcome to FF Leers Weinzapfel. We're coming at you from Chinatown in sweltering Boston, unseasonably hot Boston, but we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about this Leers Weinzapfel Associates and their amazing work. I have to say I was really honored when you asked me to moderate this discussion, because I've come to really admire the work that the partners do here. And in preparing for this discussion, I was trying to think about how quickly I could describe their work, and I was having a really hard time, and I think I finally landed on really good architecture. It's not the kind of work that has any kind of very dogmatic presence or signature flair. I kind of think about them in the same way I think of some of the other firms I really respect, ARO in New York, Weissman Freddie. I think these firms are just doing great work, and that seems like a good company to be in. The similar sized firms, thinking independently, doing a lot of public work. So let me introduce the partners here to you. Directly to my left, Andrea Leers and Jane Weinzapfel. A little bit about the firm is, I guess they'll tell you much more, but they're now beyond their 40th year in practice. The firm was founded in 1982, which is kind of amazing. And the partners met in 1966, is it? 1966, as interns at the Boston office of Earl Flansburgh, where they were working as in that small practice. Andrea studied architecture at Penn. She's from a native Massachusettsan. Jane's from Arizona, and then came here to begin her work as an architect. So with that, you're introduced, and why don't you take it away?
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Mark, and hello to all of you out there. We can't see you, you can see us, but pretend you're here, and we'll give you our best version of a studio tour. Maybe start a little bit with following up on what Mark just said about how Jane and I came together and formed our firm. As he said, we were baby architects together, you know, right out of school, both of us. It was our first job. And we had come from different parts of the country. I had gone to UPenn at the time of Louis Kahn, very inspiring period. And Jane had studied with faculty who had studied with Kahn. So there was that kind of philosophical connection from the beginning. But the real question or thing I'd like to say is that we really became friends. We found each other. We had both been in schools that we were the only women, or one or two or three at the very most. We found each other immediately as colleagues and as friends. And that was really the basis of our coming together. We worked for several years for Earl Flansburgh, and then went separate ways. Jane went on to work in a large planning firm in Boston, planning and architecture. I had a little bit of an independent practice, really small starting. And then we came together 10 years later and decided, well, let's give it a try. So that was the beginning. We had two very overarching goals. And one was, coming from the backgrounds that we had, was to do really good work for the public realm. Not private, not houses. We didn't start that way, but really things that would benefit everyone: education, youth activity centers, community, and so forth. And the second was really to create a workplace that we would enjoy, that was collaborative, that was inclusive, and that reflected the way we wanted to work. And that was a time when Jane had a small child and I was teaching, and we knew that we had to be flexible. And those were really the ground rules of how we set ourselves up, what we wanted to do, and how we would do it. Gradually, some kind of major design goals came to the fore. Always we were interested in working in the ensemble, in working in a context, not repeating it, but actually thinking about what it means to build, among other things. Most of our work was in the cities, but many on campuses. The second thing that always was driving us was the desire to make stuff. We loved the making of architecture, the materials, the tectonics, the craft, the technology, the feeling of sensing something in a tactile way. That was always important to us. And then perhaps underlying all of that was the importance to us of making a human experience, a place where people connected, where people felt good, felt excited, felt comfortable, enjoyed spaces. So it was really about the human and social experience. So that's a little bit of kind of how we got going. You'll see much more of how that played out in the coming pieces of presentation. So maybe if we could start with our, one second. Yeah.
Before we start, I just wanted to remind, remind that you should please ask questions and put them in the Q&A. And just a warning that you will not get your AIA credit unless we have a certain period of questioning. So for, help us help you.
And to start out, I wanted to say that this program has a focus on infrastructure. And so we're going to start off looking at that. Much of our early work was in that public realm, working in transportation, in airfield structures, and eventually with infrastructure of the energy sort. So we'll start off with that and then follow up with some other of our areas of research and interest.
Great. So here's where we started. We started in a small studio attached to my house. We're standing on the roof here because we could. And this was our core group, and don't look too closely, but Jane and I are there, as well as Jane's toddler at the time. And here we are today. We're in Chinatown. We're hanging out the windows there of a third floor building. And at this point, I will turn things over to Josiah Stevenson and Ashley Rao to give us a tour of our building. Come on in. Welcome.
Thanks, Andrea. So Ashley and I will give you a tour. We're in a pre-Depression era garment building in Chinatown, where our accountant today used to work as a kid delivering racks of clothing to stores in the area. Now, what is fairly unique about our office is that we're all in one big room, which I'll talk about in a second. But this is us looking out over the north to Chinatown, neighborhood of Boston that's bounced back fairly well from the pandemic. Much better than the central business district, which is a little further on. The restaurants are active, the streets are active, and it's a pleasant place to work. So we are in one big room by design. The intent is to foster a collaborative, collegial workspace as much as possible. So collaborative in that you pass by someone's desk and you might have an impromptu discussion about an aspect of the design that you're both working on. Collegial in that everyone sees and knows the projects of the firm. So not just what you're working on. You have no choice but to be aware of what everyone else is working on.
And our office is littered with models too. I think we rely on the time-tested techniques of building models by hand to explore everything from building materiality, to think about site, to think about scale, to think about the context of what surrounds our buildings on each of their places.
Now we're expanding our office to incorporate a 3D studio, printing studio, but I would imagine that models like this, handmade, will continue to be a very important part of our discovery of architecture.
Our office centers around a big open kitchen. And I think you're seeing here, actually we're gathered right here for a live viewing party, but there's always a crossword puzzle going on there. And I think we place a premium on meeting together, working together between teams, and really kind of involving the entire studio. One of my favorite things about this practice is that there's really an emphasis on always learning from each other, and that goes kind of up as well as down. We'd gotten, I think it was the MIT Met project, and Andrea, as we were celebrating this in the office, one of her comments was, we're all going to learn so much, and that just continued investment in learning and stretching yourself is a huge part of our practice.
Pictured here is a real-time example of the benefits of a collegial office. I ran into an issue and the person next to me, Sumaya, and I kibitzed about it and worked through, which wouldn't happen if you had closed door offices.
It's an opportunity to ask questions up as well as down. You know, you can always kind of ping a principal or a design team leader, but they also might grab you and say, what is this material sitting behind your desk? So it's just a real chance to hear about your project from a different perspective. We're also constantly incorporating more and more digital technology too. I think we've seen a continued use of fly-throughs and digital modeling to explain projects to ourselves, as well as to make everything, all the design decisions, evidence to our clients at an earlier stage.
So this is not a rare sight. Seagulls aren't far from here because we're near the harbor. Thank you. We'll pass it back to Jane.
Okay, where we started doing infrastructure work along with small academic work and occasional residences early on. This for the Mass Port Authority was a hanging structure for staff that man the toll facilities of the Tobin Bridge, our longest bridge in New England. Next. And at the MBTA, we did many projects, both subway projects, but also Operation Control Center, which was a 5-story vertical addition to a 5-story existing building that was operating 24/7 and that needed to continue through construction in that manner. And here our group is on the roof. Next. The UPenn Gateway was our first district energy chilled water facility. And this was won by competition. And we, as in the process of developing the project, developed a new metal screen material with the manufacturer. And at Ohio State University, we have a new pedestrian entry to the campus on the left. The new pedestrian way connects the campus with the McDonald's on the far side of the town gown dividing street, High Street. We explored glass materials here. In Taiwan, we were finalists in a design competition for a regional electricity plant that we made part of a eco park. And this is was the first of the electrical energy plants that we looked at and have had done some cogeneration facilities as well locally. Next. And our most recent infrastructure project is a district energy facility for Harvard University in Allston, Mass. It serves the expanded Harvard Allston campus, and it sets the urban design tone for the development and of academic and science and engineering and laboratories and other related development. It's in the area of a abandoned rail yard that, and here we're looking from above toward Boston, and we're on the Boston side of the river. Cambridge is on the opposite side with the Harvard College. And on this side are the business school and law school and the athletics areas. And you can see the rail yard, which is a brownfield site, has been decontaminated and is ready for a large development that will surround this facility. This was one of the first because it provides power and heat and chilled water to the first academic building, which is off on the right now, which is the Banish Science and Engineering Center. And nearby is the Alston community, a residential community that borders this large development site. And then again, we see the other side of the river in this area of Boston and beyond. The site is also surrounded with roadway ramps to the Mass Turnpike. The plant, of course, is also created to support large equipment that must have vehicle access. So we have large roll-up doors or bifold doors that also provides glazing. The facility also has a huge need for ventilation, and the upper part of that screen was all ventilation. Inside, the facility is color-coded for safety and functions and allows trucks to come into this large high bay structure for the chilled water equipment. And there are rolling cranes, and but in all the cases of this building, all areas have a good illumination for safety of workers. And the sectional layout of the building is somewhat like a Rubik cube, with the interconnection of the different functions, the electrical areas well separated from the areas that have water, the inclusion of tanks and roof equipment within the enclosing screen wall, and the ability to serve hot water, low temperature hot water to other buildings, which is great for LEED for those buildings, and also chilled water, and has the opportunity for ground source thermal as well. We developed a pedal structure of anodized aluminum to provide a 100-foot tall screen in 20-foot increments. And the pedals are fixed in position, but each position is a few degrees different than the previous. So starting, it's very closed at the stack area. Then it moves to around 45 degrees at the first corner away, then 90 degrees at the far corner, and then starts closing back as it goes around. It thus gives a lot of variety in different light circumstances. Another feature was to put technology on display, both for students, engineering students, and for the public, because these public driveways and access ramps go so close to the building. So it's tucked into a transportation arterial corridor as well. And now Tom Chung is going to take us on a project that is related to wood research.
Right. Thank you, Jane. So our explorations in sustainability, I think, continues from operational energy and the infrastructure projects that Jane just shared with you to embodied energy. And I think that's looking at renewable building materials with very low carbon footprint, namely really the material of wood and its evolution in mass timber. And I'd say all of that started 10 years ago in 2013 with our very first mass timber building, which you see here, the main space, the Oliver Design Building at UMass Amherst. It's a central place of collaboration among 3 departments across 3 different colleges, architecture, landscape architecture, and building construction technology. And the university brought them together under one roof to advocate for a sustainable built environment. Next. And so, as we see in this exploded structural axonometric, in some ways, it's a very simple structure, a simple post and beam structure with glulam columns and beams, which support large floor panels made up of CLT cross-laminated timber. These are massive panels, 8 to 10 feet wide, 48, 56 feet long. And in conjunction with that, a mass timber shear wall for lateral stability, one of the first such applicates of the technology and use in the United States. Next. And you can see the embodiment of that in this image here. The simple post and beam structure with the CLT floor panels, all visible, and the structure itself is the finish, resulting in big material savings, as well as a space that's really light-filled, warmth to the touch, fresh pine scented. And I think all of that adds to promoting a sense of human well-being in these type of spaces. Next. And during construction, we really also got to experience firsthand what's been touted in terms of the advantages of mass timber, the more precise, quieter construction processes compared to traditional materials, with far less labor in the field, resulting in far less construction waste. Next. And that same simple palette of glulams and CLTs with metal connectors were used in the central space, but in a more expressive way to shape the building's central commons, resulting in this dynamic array of what we call the zipper truss that spans the central space, which is then lit from above. And if we go to the next image, you can see the source of that daylight coming down with this pyramidal skylight at the roof garden that echoes the shape of the truss below, while supporting a lush roof garden with areas of up to 24 inches of soil depth to create a demonstration roof garden for the Department of Landscape Architecture, and also to showcase the robustness of a wood structure that really supports all of this weight. The roof garden is also a working classroom that serves, I think, a variety of social functions, from large group gatherings to intimate meetings. And, we were pleasantly surprised to hear that this roof garden was voted the most romantic place in all of Amherst by the students. And judging by this photo, I think you could probably feel the emotion here. Next. And as I end this piece on this project, here's a video that you'll see. Here you can see the main facade and the electrochromic glass that shades the inner spaces. And as we follow this drone going along the zipper truss, you can see lit by the generous skylight, and that supports the main stair. And as we zoom out, the roof garden at the center of the space, revealing the mass of the building, clad in recycled aluminum panels, a kind of protected bark of the tree, if you will, that fronts the main space, rises towards there to meet the scale of the center of campus, and a quieter, smaller scale towards the historic side. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Josiah.
Thanks, Tom. So mass timber is a building with low embodied energy, of course, half that of steel and a quarter that of concrete, but adaptive reuse and renovations with additions, which is a significant portion of our work, can be projects with even lower embodied energy. So I'd like to speak about this project, Anonymous Hall at Dartmouth College. It was an old concrete structure from the 60s with the 3rd floor of steel added a few years later. It was part of a medical school complex. It's been empty, had been empty for years because they moved medical school essentially. And this building was an eyesore. So we ended up keeping the concrete structure, adding a new public area to the south, facing the main campus, and quietly had a goal of net zero. Here you see the original building in 1972 to the right as a med school library, and the demolition in the middle, you see 2 floors of concrete and a floor of steel, and then our addition to the south. Next. So here is a gathering space at the front. The front element is the more public. tied together with a spiral stair that leads to conference rooms and double height public space. And here's the spiral stair that joins the public spaces. So the quest that I was talking about with to get net zero on a conventional budget led to this approach. The diagram here, the third-party solar array at the top, supported by our steel canopy. There's a very high R-value envelope, including a triple glazed walls and a carefully researched glass facade to the south that blocked the high summer sun and let in the lower winter sun. And probably the most important aspect of this for the carbon footprint of the planet, the reuse of this massive concrete structure. So regarding the south-facing glass, it has an interlayer of expanded metal, which, as I said, lets in the lower sun and blocks the higher summer sun, and it leads to a very pleasant glare-free space on the other side. So as you can see, it reveals itself at night and has a translucency during the day. So Ashley will now talk about Williams.
Thank you so much, Josiah. I wanted to build on what Tom and Josiah were saying about mass timber and embodied energy and net zero, and introduce the Davis Center at Williams College. This is a project that uses mass timber, that is net zero ready the day it's built, but also kind of pushes beyond that definition of sustainability to really thinking about the community that it serves. The Davis Center is the campus multicultural center. It's the home and resource for students, especially those from historically marginalized and underrepresented backgrounds. And really one of the questions we were asking here is, how can we manifest equity and inclusion in built space? What does that look like? The Davis Center, there's kind of three sets of images here. On the left is images, kind of historical images. The Davis Center was born from the spark of student activism, and it continues to catalyze difficult discussions on campus today, as you can see with these two students in the middle, about what inclusion and access mean and what challenges to that are on college campuses. This thread of self-reflection and transparency really resonates with our practice too. On the right-hand side, you can see our JUST label. We're really proud of being JUST certified as a practice. This is a transparency label that we have to renew every 2 years and requires us to really quantify how are we performing against values that are important to us: diversity and inclusion, equity, employee health, employee benefits, stewardship, and purchasing in the supply chain. To bring this back to the Davis Center, here's an overall aerial showing the final development of the project. It really consists of 3 buildings. Rice House to the north, which was originally an 1800s building, built as a single family residence, but that was dedicated to the Black Student Union since 1983. Anchoring this center area is a major new addition that really houses a lot of the public functions that had been missing in the Davis Center when they were only occupying converted single-family residences. To the south, Jeunesse House, which houses most of the kind of administration and office space in Jeunesse. And all of these really are tied together by a continuous landscape that tries to, represents trees and shrubs from different parts of the world, recognizing the kind of international community that finds a home in the Davis Center, but also one that creates a continuous, accessible way, really strengthening the north-south spine of the Williams College campus and creating a continuous, accessible connection back down to Spring Street. This is a brief fly-through that we developed early in the design process to really tell the story of the Davis Center. Behind us is the main campus quad, and as you cross Route 2, you're really entering here past the Science Center on your right into the heart of the Davis Center. On the left is Rice House, which was the kind of historical home of the Black Student Union, and as part of this project receives a deep energy retrofit, kind of bringing this up to the highest performance of envelope and of mechanical systems. In the center, the major new addition connected by a bridge back to Rice House. This is a building, you can see the kind of dynamic roof line here, and it reflects both the surrounding environment, the peaks and valleys of the Berkshires beyond, but also thinks about the relationship to the hip roofs of the converted residential structures that flank either side. A really open, transparent ground floor opens this building up to the public, inviting in the Williams community and creating this as a place for exchange that serves the entire community. Underneath the bridge, there's a connection back to Spring Street, which is the main kind of commercial corridor of Williamstown, and gives the Davis Center a front not just onto the college, but also onto the broader community, Williamstown community beyond. One thing I'll talk about in one more minute too is just the materiality of the Davis Center. Both of the original buildings use kind of a clapboard structure, but we thought about how to reinterpret that for today's, with a contemporary eye. The Davis Center, including the rigorous materials pedal. And this is really a charge to know your ingredients. So we've scrutinized every single product that goes into the construction of the building, avoiding red list chemicals, those that are most harmful to human health and to the built environment. But beyond that, we took this question of materials and really tried to make it tangible, to find materials that resonated with the mission and the history of the Davis Center. The new addition is planned to be clad in charred wood, a technique called shosugiban, a vernacular wood preservation technique from Japan that chars the wood and creates a protective layer that protects it from decay and kind of creates a long-term resilience that requires very little maintenance. This material was embraced by the Davis Center as a metaphor for the resilience of the communities that it serves through the trials that they've been through. And we really went through a large mock-up process here, both on the left-hand side, kind of testing different materials, as well as doing a large-scale full mock-up early in the design process during construction documents to understand how the material assemblies come together. This is a picture of the design team here on site. We recently celebrated the topping off of the superstructure with the beam signing with the Davis Center community, and we look forward to this project opening in spring 2024. With that, I'll pass this back to Tom to talk more about how we work together in the office.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So, the work that we've shared so far is really the collective work of the office, and I'd like to speak about how that gets done. As a design firm, I think critiquing on our own work and striving to do better with each project is really the key to staying sharp and evolving as an office. And central to that is a lot of the design lunches we have on a monthly basis, as well as an annual design retreat, which you've seen some photos of it here, where we gather as an office to review the work of the past year. And it provides opportunities for younger staff to present these projects and to share the pertinent design goals. Next. And I think also as a design firm where the craft of building and exploration of materials is a core design value, educating our staff in construction is highly important. And we take opportunities as a firm to visit our projects and construction phases to discuss how what we draw on paper, how that gets implemented in the field with construction challenges and the realities of the site. And next, and I think that also translates back itself into the office where we share the importance of construction documents that convey our design intent in a way that's clear, efficient, celebrates the joining of materials. And here's one of our associates, Ben Wilcox, giving a learning session on what a construction document set entails. Next. And I would say that education goes beyond just our staff to also really addressing the pipeline, as we realize that in order to increase equity and diversity in our profession, we need to reach out to high school students in the urban minority neighborhoods of our city to share with them the importance, the power, and the privilege of being an architect to shape our built environments. So here you can see Matt Bocatera, who leads our grassroots effort in a summer internship program where we've kind of designed that program and where we sponsor students and actively engage them in design activities, as well as site visits to our built works. And so I think our successful collaboration really wouldn't be possible without a shared sense of trust and support, right? And often it's the social activities that help us bond. So as Andrea and Jane mentioned, I think they got the formula correct when they founded the firm with two simple but interrelated goals: to create works of design distinction in the public realm and to create an environment where people enjoy working with each other. And I think when people experience that daily, their relationships go beyond colleagues to friendships. here's some sampling of how we play together in the office. And next, also then outside of the office, visiting our projects, as well as notable works by other architects in our region. Really a fun day together to learn from our colleagues, as well as just really enjoy each other's company outside. And during the pandemic, this was a challenge, but we strive to continue that, taking necessary precautions, but gathering when we could. I think starting in early 2021 with masks on, outside, visiting our projects around our city of Boston and Cambridge. I really remember this time really being moved when we were able to see each other after being away with just months of only Zoom interactions. And I just remember wanting to just hug everybody when we finally were able to see each other in person again. Now, we do have some unique, a few unique traditions, and I think one of them is the longest running event, over 30 plus years, and that's our Chinese or New Year lunar celebration where we share dim sum together. And that was especially meaningful for me as someone of Asian descent. I think when in 2020, just before, like a couple of weeks before the shutdown that our country experienced, we just ventured across the street to Chinatown to show our support for the community, when I think at that time, many were avoiding it given the COVID breakout that had started in Wuhan and the resulting, I think, prejudice against the Asian community that I think was prevalent during the pandemic. But on a kind of a lighter note, I think another office favorite here, next please, is our cherished summer gathering, a day in Maine as we call it, where we gather at Andrea's house in Maine with our families and friends to relax, eat well, enjoy the natural setting and each other's company. And I think as I end this portion of the presentation, here's a fun video of what it's like to be there, a day of rest in this natural setting of beautiful Casco Bay with striking peninsulas created by receding glaciers tens of thousands of years ago, playing games, swimming, boating, and just enjoying the feast. I think we really get to see each other and appreciate each other as people first, architects second. So when it comes time for us to be architects again, we design in the ensemble of buildings, as Andrea noted, respecting and while enhancing our context. I think our appreciation and care for each other as we collaborate together is really reflective of our design and also vice versa. So we find these moments, although they're, it's only a day together, really, really transformative in terms of how we work together. So I think with that, I'll pass it back on to Mark and others.
Hey, before we even, let me just say a few last words, or maybe you want to start, Mark.
Well, please go ahead.
I was just going to, we've got a little something on the screen, Nathan. Let's see. Okay. Thanks, Tom and Ashley and Josiah for really kind of helping sketch the firm here for you. There were just a couple of thoughts I wanted to add at the end here about the long arc of our practice, what we have seen, where we started and where we are now. There are kind of three major areas that have been kind of sea changes in a way, and which we took part in. We were early on for many of them, but have really affected practice. The first, of course, is the digital technology revolution. When we began, we were drawing with pencils. And today, and a few years into practice, of course, all of that changed. And today we take that for granted. We were aware of digital technology back when Jane and I finished school. It was coming, but it was upon us some years, many years actually, into our practice. That has changed everything: drawing, modeling, presenting, just as you can see here today. And that has certainly been one major shift. But the second is climate urgency. Yes, in the 70s and the 80s, there were a lot of efforts to begin to think about solar technologies and wind technologies. We were thinking about it. We were building it into some of our early projects, but the urgency of it has really begun to be a major driver today in a way that it wasn't at the beginning. And that's a second kind of real evolution. And the third, of course, is designing for social justice and equity. Now, when we started, that's where we were. We came out of a school and a time when the belief in architecture as improving human life, social interaction was high, was great. And that was our starting point. And then, as you all know, many other concerns, more formal concerns, more technical concerns began to drive architecture. And here we are again, coming full circle to a time when we understand that architecture has the power to change lives, to make life better or worse. And so in some sense, these are issues we've all been working on all along, but have seen a tremendous evolution in the sense of our practice.
And to follow on a bit about the issue of social equity, we've seen changes in our work. All of us architects have become experts in accessibility in buildings. That has happened in this time frame. But we've had also to become experts in hardening our courthouses and now our schools. In practice, we've seen an increase in gender balance, which has improved, but diversity still needs to be improved. We are all working on that, I believe. We are in positions to close the gender gap for women. That is a key social equity issue around the world, and we in our individual practices can do that now. And we have the ability and the guides of JUST, as Ashley was saying, to help us to think through how to best close those gaps. So that will, I think, be a challenge, and there are many more challenges in the social justice area that we both in our work and in our practice need to become more aware of and address.
Well, that seems like a great place to begin a discussion. And in a way, I feel like the elephant in the room is the gender question. And in some ways, I'm very reluctant to ask you about this because we're here to talk about your architecture, but there's no escaping the fact that this is a women-founded and led practice. And when you started this firm in 1982, that must have been incredibly unusual. It's still unusual, which is terrible. But maybe you could just talk a little bit about the challenges you faced, when you began, was the response, were you thinking about this, the fact that you were women, how it shaped the practice over the beginning of your, and how that's changed?
Yeah, well, the first thing I will say is that these issues, it's only a little discouraging that the same questions are being asked today as when we started. But moving past that, I would just start by saying, when Jane and I began, we weren't thinking of ourselves as women architects. We were thinking of ourselves as architects, of course. We wanted to do as good work as we could. We wanted to build a practice, no small thing. Yes, there were barriers, but basically we put our heads down and we powered through all of that until some years in, I can't remember which year, I think it was Caesar Pelli who brought to our attention that in fact we were women and that that was not unnoticed and we could do something with that or not. And at that point, we accepted that. We celebrated it where that was appropriate. We acknowledged that it would be an issue where it wasn't. And we kind of built in that awareness. And we also came to understand that it was really important. I think it was Deborah Deitch, who former editor of Record, right? Who said, you know, it's really important for women coming after you to address the issue and not just to blow right by it. And I think that was a real turning point for us.
We were also at a time, even before we joined together to practice architecture together, where we were participants in what was called Women Architects, Landscape Architects and Planners here in Boston. And it was a kind of breakthrough in kind of thinking about this. We had all been in our little isolated areas. One person was an engineer working with 40 men, and she adjusted to that, but it was always kind of a presence. And so being the only woman in a client meeting group, a project meeting for construction, we got used to how to handle that and to mentor younger women about what they were going to experience and kind of how to think about it. So that was very early on, but we were also having the issue where we wanted to be seen as architects. We wanted our architecture to speak for itself. And what we found is that we found like-minded clients who were willing to take the risk. It was seen at that time to be a risk to engage a women architecture firm. Even women's colleges would ask us if we had done contract drawings or construction, and we started taking to women's colleges our roll of drawings to show that we had done that. It was curious time that way. So but much of that has improved with the gender balance in the schools, and we're seeing in our office both projects with men and women working together, and then some projects highly technical with a women leadership team, and everyone gets used to it. So, I mean,
first, I'd like to remind people, please do ask your questions, post your questions in the Q&A, so you don't just have to listen to mine. But one thing I thought was interesting is in your fine monograph, you're published by Princeton Architectural Press, I highly recommend. You do use terms like weaving, stitching, terms that are coded for better or worse, or wrongly or not, as kind of feminine or gender coded. Do you think of that as what was your thought process on using that language?
Several. We're proud of that. We're proud that we make things, and we're proud of the what women make, and not just in architecture. So using those terms as part of the overall vocabulary about a design, urban design, seems just right.
Actually, there's another origin of that language, which was not gender specific, but rather tailoring. Many people had observed, and we thought about it ourselves, that our buildings were maybe well tailored, meaning attentive to form, material, detail, refinement, and so forth. And so I think the notion of tailoring, of making specific, of making out of something physical and textural was part of the reason for choosing those categories. And actually, as you say it, I had never thought about that as being gender specific until you've just mentioned that. It was really about the process of making things. and the tailoring and the making of fine garments as a metaphor for building. That's interesting that you would see it now that way.
Well, I mean, one thing about your work is I would never consider the work gendered. And I think one of the more interesting things is how much infrastructural industrial work you've done, which no one would ever, which I mean, that's typically coded as male, right? But you're building these energy plants, which they're fantastic projects. I mean, and I know that even when you were beginning your practice, infrastructure was a lot of what you were doing. Maybe you could talk about why you were looking at that. Was part of that a response to say this, you know, we can do this, or was this what was available to you? Maybe what was the philosophy and continuing philosophy behind that kind of work?
I think we came at that in a couple of different directions. One was that we had opportunities in infrastructure that were not to be missed. We that same engineer that I mentioned was invited us to, made us known to us projects at Massport that were might be of interest to us. So we had a connection to kind of know what was coming down the pike in certain areas. And we said, oh yeah, that would be interesting. And they were not glamorous projects necessarily. They were curious projects, but also working individually. We had different experiences in transportation, and I had already worked with a number of clients at the MBTA. Andrea had at Massport, and we had a kind of connection, some through the Women Transportation Seminar, with women clients in those agencies. So we were aware of what was available, what was going to be available in 3 years, something like that. I think very much like any guys would do as well. You know, they was it was also in the public realm. It was important. It's an equity issue in terms of supplying transportation to all neighborhoods. And the energy thing is district energy is so important to sustainability now, resilience and reduced emissions and reduced field use, that it's challenging and exciting.
I would just add too, remember we were starting a practice, right? And we did not have access to a network of old boys. We didn't know developers. We didn't have connections at universities particularly. We took what we could. And these highly technical projects presented themselves as opportunities. They were not so much desired by anybody else, but we thought we can make architecture here. That's how we'll get going. It was really a question of seizing the opportunity and enjoying the challenge. And that really kind of led one to the next. Similarly, our very first opportunities were in publicly announced projects for the state, for the city. These were not projects at the time we started that were so very desirable to everybody, but they were accessible for us. So I'd like to say that we planned from the very first moment to have this incredible strategy of doing stuff that nobody else wanted. But in fact, it was opportunistic and also really interesting to us.
And it was in a time before affirmative action. There were not women business enterprises as a kind of identified opportunity in any way. But the state did acknowledge on occasion, which was amusing to see, the percentage of women architect design projects that they had, and we could see where they were getting those percentages.
And Andrea, I would say that you talk about kind of the seizing the opportunity, is that it's interesting when I hear that this is what we're continuing to do, right? You know, with the mass timber, it was an opportunity presented to us. We didn't go into that project, oh, we're going to explore mass timber, but I think it speaks to a kind of like innate curiosity of and looking for opportunities and how can we make buildings better for people who inhabit them, but also for our environment. So I think it's no accident in terms of the evolution of our practice.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting question about that materials and research and investigation. How do you manage that in the office? I mean, you were some of the first and largest timber frame projects, or not timber frame, but timber,
mass timber.
mass timber projects. So what kind of resources and time do you devote to material investigations here?
Well, I think Josiah or Tom can answer about the wood. I'll interject about other materials as well, glass and stainless steel and aluminum and finishes on these projects and copper. And I think that curiosity that Tom mentioned is a big feature of it. It is what's appropriate for this particular site and what is a material that would resonate with existing buildings or an ensemble of buildings. And would we want to use those materials that are already in use? Would we want to complement with something else? So it's solving architectural challenges and at the same time making sure that those materials are up to the task. So we've sent off materials to be tested with certain chemicals that are endured in energy plants, and we've found the best ones that are going to work like that, and other kind of testing of anodized aluminum, that sort of thing. But in the wood area, I think Andrea, Josiah, and Tom
And Ashley.
and Ashley, my goodness, have the really developing expertise in wood and jumped in wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I would just add that with an emerging technology and a construction type like mass timber, you know, the design is just the tip of the iceberg, right? I think what proved success in our projects has been really the realization and the need to go beyond the design. And by that, I mean, we have to really get nitty gritty and down to the details of who produces these, right? And where does it come from? And they all have different, there's no standard right now. So they all the suppliers do it differently. What's it going to cost? How do you mitigate the risk of the client and the contractor that doesn't want to take on these new types because it's a headache for them? And so it's really the expanding the role of the architect beyond just the designer, but as really a thought leader and an expert in everything related to that material. And really, I think one of the challenges and the fun of it is that, you know, I think over the years, maybe through legal issues, we've sort of given away the responsibility of constructing our buildings to the contracting community. And I think with the new technology where it's so critical to understand that in how we design, how that's produced, because it's going to be, you know, instrumental to the design of it, it's an opportunity to bring back and take back under the control of the architect, the fabrication, the construction, in a way that I think we are part of that discussion again, that we are seen as the people that know how not just how it's designed, but how it's fabricated, how it's made, how it goes together, so that when we say it's going to cost this much, or when a contractor says, well, it's going to be too expensive, we can say, no, it's not. Actually, we've done the research. Go talk to the supplier number 1, 2, and 3, and we have these numbers. And it's really, that has really, I think, been the way we've been able to continue to progress mass timber and suggest it for all of its benefits, both environmental and for human well-being, to clients that might be hesitant to really take on this journey with us and come along with us. And you're in good hands, you know, so.
Well, that brings us to, I did want to talk specifically about one of your mass timber buildings, and that's the John Oliver not the John Oliver of HBO fame, unfortunately, but the John Oliver architecture school.
Oliver.
Oh,
Oliver, yeah.
okay, well, there
Well,
you go.
there's the difference.
The editor, the writer missed that. Okay. So I did want to talk to you about this because building an architecture school is an amazing opportunity, because the building is not just a space for education to happen, but it is a teaching tool in and of itself. So building an architecture school, what an interesting opportunity. What lessons were you trying to impart? How did you approach that design program?
I'm going to throw that one to Josiah because he was in the thick of that.
We had designed a building that was a steel structure with cantilevers, and in a design development meeting, someone from the building construction technology department, which is one of the 3 departments in the building, said, "We do a lot of research in timber. We'd like this building to be in wood." So he said, "Great, I have no idea what that means. We'll ask the cost estimator how much it costs." And they said a little bit more. And so that's when we learned for the first time how to design with wood. But the users, the architecture school, really wanted to have a project that conveyed construction. So, you know, we have some hung ceilings, but a lot of exposed structure, a lot of exposed deck, etc. Also, a lot of our other college and universities that we worked with, like that have engineering schools, want to show the building as a teaching tool as well. For example, Wentworth Institute of Technology.
And at the Oliver Building, we were bringing together for the first time departments that were all over the campus. They had not been used to working together. And they had spent a year before we got there talking about being together, about what it meant for them. And there was a tremendous synergy between them once, and we heard about this. We heard that the landscape people were seeing the quality of models that the architects were making, and they wanted to up their game. And the building technology folks were really on display. The labs are down on the ground floor, and everybody could see what was possible. So the kind of thinking together, making together, inventing together, learning together that they hoped for really was embodied in the building. That central space is for everything. It's for presentations, it's for reviews all broken up, it's for social gatherings. And it really has become a place of gathering and a place in the whole campus, by the way. It's on the route up the hill from the main campus to the housing. And in bad weather, people just cut through the building because it's fun to do. And so it's a real crossroads. But working with a school of design, several schools of design, was challenging. You know, they'd send us sketches, of course. We know we have a great idea for you. But they were really open also to imagining what they had never had. And that was really great, including the making of the building in wood. So there was a real exchange in the process.
Another building I wanted to ask you about is the one of yours that I get to spend a lot of time in, which is the Science Center at Harvard, the Jose Luis Serre original building, which is just a wonderful object and curious and inventive. And your addition to it, you do a lot of adaptive reuse. And I'm just wondering what your approach was to this project. It's virtually seamless. It fits in beautifully. In fact, I almost didn't know which parts were yours and which parts were original. I was like, maybe you could talk a little bit about the strategies behind that project and other adaptive reuse projects. We looked at the anonymous building, wonderfully named at Dartmouth, but please go ahead.
Well, it's actually one of my all-time favorite projects of ours. It was hard. It was our challenge was add a bunch of space as much as you can on a site where there was no ground to be built on. And so we kind of entered into the spirit of Jose Luis Sert and thought, what would he do here? And we found places to build vertically, 3 separate parts of the building. And we began to think about material, and what would he think about materially? Well, it's a heavy sculptural precast building. It's a very didactic building, as you know. It's all about exposed precast structure and exposed everything, actually.
It's the Pompidou Center of all of
It's the
that.
Pompidou Center of Harvard. And so entering into the mindset of what, not just repeating what's there, but what would Sert do these many years later was kind of how we thought about it. And we thought about these kind of glass volumes inserted in the body of a heavy masonry thing as a way to articulate the new and the old, but in a language. And so the grain of it, the frequency of the model of the panels, that was a material invention, by the way, because the glass channels, which are insulated, were the first use in this country of scale. Stephen Hall had done a small amount in Minnesota, but this was the first full building of it. So there was a
And
lot
insulated
and
was
insulated.
a whole research
Yeah,
project.
it was a real research project. So we really, and Sert's partner, Jackson, was alive at the time. And so we had all these strategies for how we were going to make all these additions. We brought him in and put them all on the table. And he pointed to the one we finally did. And he said, oh, we looked at that. We were going to do that, but it was VE'd out. There was too much building for the so we knew we were on the right track. And we brought him in later when it was finished and said, okay, this is your chance. Don't mince words. How do you think we did? And he looked around and he said, pretty good. He said, could have used a spot of color. But that was
that the genesis of the red stare at Dartmouth?
may have been, it may have been, but it was, that's how we came to that. Since that time, we've done 3 other renovations within the building, and we're doing 2 more even as we speak. So our project manager there calls us a friend of the building, and I love that.
Maybe my last question from you before we'll go on to, we have some fine questions from the audience. Anybody who would like to add some, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them, or as many as we can. But I thought maybe the best question for you, I mean, obviously there are a lot of young architects in the audience here. Maybe you could give them some advice on starting a project, especially young architects who'd like to go off on their own, especially if they're women practices, which we'd like to encourage. Do you have any ideas for like what you would suggest as ways to begin, or what to think about, or things that are challenges they're going to face going forward?
Go for it, Jane. We've answered this question before.
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, you do it, Jane. You do it this time.
Well, hang in there, I would say, when there's a meeting, don't leave too early, stay and make your point well. Because it's the art of persuasion as much as it is a art of design.
It's really true. Everybody has their own way of starting. And we often say you just have to have the passion in the belly for it, because it's hard. It's hard. There are long periods without enough income and plenty of inspiration, but you just need to want to do it a lot, and then you find your way. And that's what we've always advised young people starting.
So first question from the audience, from Anthony Campusano, would like to know, when you're experimenting materially, how do you get buy-in from clients?
I would say the research is part of that. And I would say introducing early and often a material, if it's not one they're used to, also helps them think as the design is developing, what that can be like. And including manufacturers to make sure that it's going to perform really well. So doing your research and showing that research to your client because clients are very concerned that their material is going to perform, be durable, last, and it's a mutual conversation.
This is a really good question. And for an introvert like myself, I feel for this person. So an anonymous question. How do you encourage shy or non-participating employees to join the activities of the office community?
Ashley, go for that.
I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like I'm one of those people, and sometimes I feel like I'm not. I think that one thing that we do that has been successful for me is, again, it's kind of, where's the passion in your belly? What's the thing that motivates you in the office? And is there an opportunity to engage in that? And I think that can be everything from the person that says, you know, what I really miss is that, you know, Friday afternoon happy hour. So I'm going to be the one that's going to go out and get the snacks and the drinks and make that happen. Or is it someone who's really interested in sustainability? So I think just kind of creating a couple of touch point opportunities throughout the office. So that people can really follow their passion. I'd say another thing that we do that I think maybe gives a little bit of a push as well of the pull is give younger staff a lot of opportunities to address the entire office. So Tom touched a little bit on some of our design lunches. What we try and do is during the pre-design phase of every project, present a project in development to the office with a couple of design options. You know, this is what we're thinking about. And a lot of times we try and have the youngest office staff or the youngest, you know, staff on the project actually give that presentation. So it's the nudge that helps them take ownership of the process that they're involved in too. So I think doing that in a way where it feels not like a punishment, but like an opportunity, but really having everybody step into that role. Tom, do you have any other thoughts on that one?
You know, I think it's really the makeup of the office and the people. And I think, you know, it's fundamental to our hiring process where we're not just looking for super designers, but that might have a large sense of ego. But I think as important as the design talent and creativity of a prospective employee, just as important is how we feel that person will work as a team member, so that it's about we and it's not about I, right? And I think that's important, that we bring people that love working together and collaborating. And when we do that, then I think that's half the battle, right?
Another question, this one in regards to the Davis Center at Williams. First, was it a design build project? How did you get the CD phase mock-up or whatever? Was it publicly bid? And what, more interestingly, what's the motif of making the proposed shape of roof for the Davis Center? So can you explain what the generation of that interesting roof line?
That's a whole
Ashley,
lot of questions.
Ashley.
Go for it, Ashley.
Let me unpack those one at a time. So I will say having a full-size mock-up that early was definitely new for me too. And in the case of this project, it was facilitated by having a CM on board early. So this was not kind of this was an invited CM process as opposed to publicly bid, but it was a great opportunity. When I sent out photographs, kind of that same photograph that you saw to the office, again, kind of, you know, sharing the status of our work, I got emails from people that had been with Leers Weinzapfel for 30 years saying, wow, I've never seen a mock-up that early. What's going on at that corner? You know, so I think having that opportunity was really great and fun for us. The roof shape on the Davis Center, I would say, was inspired by a lot of the context around it. There were two motifs that we talked about in design, both within our design team and with the client group that we were working with. One was, again, the beautiful Berkshire Mountains that are surrounding this site. So this idea of peaks and valleys is something that is part of the experience of being at Williams. And to kind of echo that in a roof shape that's visible from the outside, but also it helps shape all the inside spaces too. So we have that same kind of dynamic floating ceiling line on the inside, and that makes all of the upstairs spaces really unique. But similar to the kind of reflection of the mountain context was also thinking about the hipped roofs of the two converted residential buildings that flanked either side. We didn't want to say, oh, these are hip buildings, you know, let's build another hipped roof, but thinking about roof shape is an important part of that context and how we might want to reinterpret it in this situation.
A question from Helen Solomon, who would like to know if you experienced any prejudice when you were in training as architects and in graduate school.
I would talk about it a little bit differently. On a long technical project at the MBTA that had some men who were not used to having a woman present, and it made them uncomfortable. And they, I think, just staying calm and responding, appreciating their questions, responding as you would to someone who knew more about the process. All of that seemed to work over time. And also to be able to have a human connection and fun with people also kind of diminishes that. And being wise about what you're doing, people respect. And so gradually, I would say these dissolved or were resolved.
Certainly in school and in our early years of practice, there were episodes where we were uncomfortable, where we were made to feel uncomfortable. And partly that was really just because of the rarity of women. People were simply not used to seeing us there at all.
Yeah.
And there were episodes. This is the sort of question, Helen, that I'm sad to be answering 40 years after we started our practice, but it is still a question and still real. But yes, I would say in the beginning there were instances that were really uncomfortable that we just kind of, as I said, put our heads down and plowed past. That's very different today. And I think we have come a long, long way. It's not there, but it is very different. There's a much greater level. First of all, there are a lot more women. I mean, that made all the difference. And secondly, there's a lot more awareness of respect for everyone. And that is different. But when I hear people say, as they did, back in the, I don't know, early 90s when I was teaching, there was just no interest in talking about this. It was considered fixed. You know, we've made progress, let's move on, let's not focus on this. But of course it wasn't. So I always say, though we've come a very long way, we still have a way to go. And there's no way around that. And it's going to take everyone. And that's why we continue to mentor younger women and to help them grow. And it's a long haul we're in here.
It's also getting more rare, I think.
Yeah, it is.
There are men who are terrific mentors and very positive about their female boss or their female support person. I would say that by and large that has improved steadily. And not that there aren't experiences that still need to be dealt with, but the trend is good.
Even at that time, I just want to add one thing. At the time, Earl Flansburgh hired us in 1966, 2 women in a 9-person firm. We used to say he'd scooped up 90% of the women in the city of Boston and Cambridge. He was a tremendous mentor. He took an interest in us and he supported us. So there were people who were exceptional in that way. And for years after, every 10 years, Jane and I would take him out to lunch and say, thank you. You know, he was more than just a good employer. He was a helper in education. He was personally an advocate. So there were very bright moments like that. And it made a big difference to us at our beginnings.
A couple more questions. One is, for the more technical aspects of your projects, do you work with consultants, or do you try to have those, or do you have those figures, individuals with technical expertise in-house?
Both. We work with a wide range of excellent consultants. We learn from them, and we value their participation, and they're collaborative, and they are a clear part of the work. And we also have within our studio some people who are pretty expert on many things, and are a resource to the contractor, actually, in asking how could we work this out. We've gotten ourselves in this kind of bind, and are able to make a good analysis of what can be done.
Okay, well, I've got a final question for you, unless anybody else would like to add additional questions. But this one I thought was really interesting. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but essentially noted that a lot of your leadership team is, well, it's very diverse now. And the question was, you know, how do you manage being a women-owned business? And I mean, as you're planning for the future, what are the plans for that down the line?
The plan for the future is to continue in the vein that we are. We have a deep bench of both men and women, and we have an ownership program that includes many people that you haven't heard from today, who are in leadership positions in the office. And so, and interestingly enough, the men leadership group is supportive of this. And so that's really pretty interesting. So I think it's in good hands, but we try to be balanced in terms of, in many ways, have very diverse, and that includes men and women working together, people from all continents, and young and old.
And I think our future might include not only being a woman's business, but a minority business as well. That's certainly something within the realm of possibility, and the folks we have right now. And the notion is not to fulfill government expectations so much as to really be as broad-based and rich in experience as we can be. We think that will make better architecture, and it will certainly make a better working community.
Oh, another question here. I love this question from, and I apologize for slaughtering your name, Boyana Samazar. Sorry. Thanks for this inspirational firm presentation. There you go. What do you think has changed since you started as an architect, and what would you tell 35-year-old you now from this perspective?
Be bold.
Yeah.
If I were looking back to, think big, ask what's next, ask what's important, and share opinions that aren't entirely allied, And the conversation has a result that makes it, you learn more. So
Now, our 35-year-old selves were just getting rolling. You know, we'd been at it for quite a while, but we were just getting some steam as a studio. And what would we say now to those two?
to us,
To
as
us,
35-year-olds.
You know, I think Jane said it well. Just be fearless, be ambitious, try things, don't be afraid to fail, and push the limits. I think we
And
did that
value
in a
your
way.
time.
Value your time. Don't forget to leave time for the rest of life. I
Right.
think that's what we would say.
It seems like a wonderful way to close it. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to FF, whatever that stands
First
for.
Friday.
First Fridays. Yeah, it was a real pleasure to talk to you about your wonderful practice.
Thanks so much, Mark.
I want to second that and say something to all of you for just what a wonderful way to wind up this season with such an insightful look both back and forward about not just how you can run a practice, but a sustainable, responsible, and I might add, beautifully designed collection of work. And we truly appreciate the time and thought that you've all put into this and the opportunity to see inside your office and to see more about your project. So thank you so much.